You hear time and time again that you need to network because networking is the key to success. It's the key to finding a great job. It's the key to finding your dream role. But what if you're a first generation professional like myself who was born into a family without any professional network or really any useful career connections? By the end of this episode, you will know how to build your career from scratch, even if you're starting at the number zero, like I was, how to find people you should actually be networking with that are going to move you towards the direction that your career desire is, and how to approach someone and create, but also foster a relationship with them that's going to allow them to be useful in your network, not just in the short term, but in the long run as well, even if it's someone that you have never met before. Bienvenidos. Welcome to the Careers Without Connections podcast, the podcast for first generation professionals who are building their careers from scratch and navigating unfamiliar spaces. I'm your host, Gianna Linares. I was raised by immigrants, which I'm very proud of my upbringing. And my parents really instilled in me the values of hard work and perseverance. But as the first woman in my lineage to have a white collar job and accomplish a lot of different types of professional milestones, I've had to build my network completely from the ground up. And that has been very challenging because as I went through college, I saw everyone leveraging their networks to get things like internships, research projects, job offers. It's so different when you come from a family of people who have gone to school and they've gotten their degrees and they're in a variety of professions, because then that automatically gives you a network that you're born into. So the challenge was, as I was going through college, I was seeing people leveraging their networks to get things like internships or even most importantly, job offers. I didn't have anyone in my immediate circle to help me find those things, because having a strong network means a lot of things and it can be leveraged in a lot of different ways that I really just didn't have anyone to explain to me and I did not understand at the time. Didn't have anyone to answer questions I had about my career, so it would take me longer to get to the right connection. I didn't have anyone to help me find opportunities in the area of work that I was interested in because I didn't have that initial connection, like a warm introduction or someone to even just tell you like, hey, why don't you look at other types of organizations such as these names, because this person already works in that field and they're able to like immediately list off like there's these other types of organizations that do similar work to what I do. You should look into them. Most importantly, I didn't have anyone to connect me to other professionals. And now that I'm older, I understand how important this is, because it is really not just for the warm lead aspect that I mentioned earlier, but being able to talk to someone that is doing the role that you are interested in, even if you are at different stages of your career, whether you're like in early stages of your college or if you are about to graduate, there is still so many different directions that you can take your degree that you don't even realize yet. But the more you're able to talk to people doing as close to exactly what the type of job that you envision yourself doing, the more informed you're going to be. And you're going to not just know, do I like that? Does that sound interesting to me? Do I want to pursue a whole career in that field? But it's also going to give you the information of advantage of knowing, okay, I'm going to find a job in that industry. I'm going to find a job for that employer. I'm going to look for that type of role. And I am going to already understand what they're looking for, what types of skills, what types of values, maybe like certain keywords, not keywords, but types of terminology that's commonly used in that field. Or you might even get a referral, which referrals are statistically shown to significantly improve the likelihood of you getting an interview and actually getting a job offer. I started in community college, which it was definitely the cost-effective route and did contribute to me being able to graduate without debt by far. But part of the reason why those higher accredited schools, like the Ivy Leagues or just the big name schools, part of the reason why you're paying so much to go to those schools is, of course, like to have the credentials of you went there, but also like the type of networks that that gives you access to, like the alumni that went there or that school's connections and relationships to other professional organizations that they themselves have built and cultivated over time to allow their students and their alumni to more easily have a foot up when they graduate. This is where community college kind of is definitely the big trade-off, which I really didn't understand this at the time when I was going through community college. I was really just siloed in on how can I not take out thousands of dollars of debt by the age of 22. You just don't have the types of professional opportunities and networking opportunities that you have at more traditional universities in general. Like even when I transferred to a 4-year university after doing my gen eds, I remember when I finally did start to discover the types of career and professional development services that the school offered, I was like, wow, this is really helpful. This is why school is so expensive because I think a lot of people don't realize that all those like resources and services that the school offers you, they're already charging you in your tuition. So you may as well take advantage for it because you're already paying for it. That's another thing is that I feel like first gens, we sometimes tend to feel kind of like guilty with like we don't want to bother. I feel like we're taught to be really, at least like from my background, we're taught to be really self-sufficient. Like we're taught to kind of just work really hard and that'll allow us to get to where we need to get to, but that's not the case. Like you need to ask for help and especially at like certain stages of your life when you are in like that incubator phase of college and education, you absolutely should be taking advantage of the resources again that you are paying for and that you're not going to have access to once you graduate. Sure, like your school says, like, oh, you'll always have access to our alumni or whatever, which I'm pretty sure they literally charge you to join those networks. Like they ask for more money from you than what you've given them. But realistically, like a year or two after you leave, you're not going to be able to leverage your resources and professors and other college professionals that were around you that were at your disposal. I really didn't understand the importance of networking and how having a strong network could like really truly be leveraged. So when I wanted to pursue things like research projects or internships or when it came time to of course start applying for jobs, I was met with a lot of rejections because think about it. I was just another name in a sea of applications. I wasn't someone's who had already been mentioned by word of mouth. I wasn't someone's niece or family member or anything like that. When I transferred into university during COVID, it made it that much harder to get plugged into career resources through the school. Most of my university experience also, unfortunately, was during COVID in Oregon. And we maintained remote classes for, I think it was 4 terms in a row, over a year. And we kept the mask mandate for the first 2 terms, even after we were back in person. And people were consistently getting really sick, professors and students. And so we were going in and out of remote and virtual classes, even when we were supposed to be back in person. So that made it even more challenging to get plugged into career sources and get plugged into networks. Because I think a really important piece of networking is literally just being visible, like in person. It doesn't always have to be like posting on LinkedIn or, being everywhere on LinkedIn and social media. Right now, for us, like younger professionals, recent grads, the people that are making the hiring decisions, the directors and the presidents and the hiring managers, a lot of them are used to like old fashioned ways of networking, which is like, hi, hello, shake your hand, nice to meet you. After I was able to find a couple of mentors and resources in university, for example, in grad school, we had a professional development and career services director. And I feel like I really started to utilize her, one, because I felt comfortable with her. I could ask her any question. She never made me feel dumb, but she really was like my first big introduction into networking. And my master's program also made networking and professional development part of our curriculum. I didn't even really start to pursue or like try to do networking until I was in grad school. Like I just again I didn't understand the importance of it. But she kind of helped me understand like you got to just start reaching out to people. You got to start cold emailing people. This is who is in my network, and this is like other people in your network and your program and at the university that could potentially help you. But I feel like one thing she would always tell me is that she'd be like, why don't you just ask? Why don't you just reach out, say hello, and ask about, do they want to talk to you? Are there opportunities with their team and things like that? And at first, I didn't believe her. I was like, what do you mean I can just ask for things like that? But it turns out that she ended up having a really good point because I started reaching out to complete strangers who were doing things that I was interested in, who I at the time felt like this is going to be really valuable person to add to my network and they're going to have really useful information that I need to move forward in my career. And I started to reach out to them and introduce myself and ask if we could have some sort of informational chat or conversation so I could learn some area of expertise that they had that they were doing. A lot of those messages are definitely ignored, but of the conversations that I was able to set up, whether it be in person or virtual, I did start to learn how important it was to actually be really intentional with the way that I was networking. And the more likely that I would be able to get jobs I was actually interested in because I was being intentional and I guess you could even say strategic about the way that I was networking. So, how I would do this is, well, I learned a lot from my mistakes. Like, first, I made the mistake of not even really understanding how to send a cold email. I remember I would say, like, Dear Mr. and Mrs. But I did that because that was the template that my university gave me. But now I'm like, it really doesn't matter who you're talking to. Like, Mr. and Mrs. is like really a stretch 99.9% of the times. My messages were also sometimes too long. Like, you kind of want to just get to the point of, hey, like, this is who I am. If you can weave into your message or your outreach on, whether you're emailing them or messaging them on LinkedIn or even leaving them a voicemail, you just kind of want to say, hey, this is who I am. Maybe like weave in something either interesting about yourself, like I'm a first generation college student, or if you have something in common with them, like you went to the same school, or if you have a shared connection and you're able to like name drop that person and say, hey, like, this person advised me to reach out to you. Of course, you want to ask for the permission of that person, but it goes back to that piece of being able to leverage your network to grow your network. Another thing that I made the mistake of that I find a lot of people, this honestly is kind of a pet peeve of mine nowadays, but when people reach out and they just kind of overcomplicate the actual get it set up for us to like meet and talk. Like, immediately find days and times that work for you and just send it to them because you want to eliminate as much barriers and as much friction to just getting the informational conversation actually scheduled, especially if this is a busy person, which everyone is busy. Everyone's time is more valuable than yours, right? I think that there is such a thing as being too forward. I think really what you just need to do is you want to get in front of the person before you want to make any sort of ask. So if it is someone who you want to get a referral, maybe first say, oh, hey, like I'd love to chat and learn more about your role and the work that you're doing with this company. They know what you want, but it's better to kind of warm up to them a little bit rather than just being like a random name and message on their screen. After you've had that initial conversation with them, like a lot of the initial ice melts, and it's a lot less awkward and they know you a little bit more. I feel like that initial conversation really changes a lot of things because people have that impression of you and they're able to say like, oh, this is an interesting, promising individual. Like, I wouldn't have an issue referring them and having my name be tied to them, because that's another thing is like, imagine if someone refers you and you end up being a horrible employee, then that falls on them. That looks bad on them too. And that tarnishes their rapport with their colleagues as well. Especially when you get into more competitive spaces, people are very mindful of those things. Those are all the mistakes essentially that I made and have found and have learned over a period of time of trial and error. But as far as like, you want to find the correct people, because Why are you going to be reaching out to people in five different industries when you're only interested in one? You want to find people who are as close as possible to doing the exact role that you're interested in if you can find it. I wanted to be a policy analyst when I was straight out of school. So I used to find analysts and people that were doing policy research and analysis type roles. And the challenge with that is that sometimes titles don't always reflect positions and responsibilities and duties well. So that would again kind of go back into the networking piece. I remember one time one of my mentors connected me to an auditor in Washington who was actually doing a lot of the type of work that I was interested in, but he was like an auditor. And I would have never thought to have reached out to him had she not, told me, hey, he's actually doing that kind of work. Why don't you talk to him? Another thing is finding someone who is working at the place that you want to work for. Maybe you aren't able to connect with the exact position, but maybe you have a dream company that you want to work for. And if you're able to connect with someone in that space, then one, they'll be able to give you a little bit of that information advantage and insider knowledge, but they might actually be able to say, oh, hey, I know someone who is doing the type of job that you're interested in. And then they can connect you. Because the thing is, not everyone is on LinkedIn. Not everyone is on Instagram the way that, our younger generation is. And so sometimes there's people that are very well established and accomplished and are people that you would only ever meet either by meeting them in person or meeting them through word of mouth. Another thing is it's easier if you can find people who you have things in common with. Maybe you guys went to the same school or you have mutual connections, or if they are on social media and you're able to say like, oh, this person also has a dog or this person also enjoys reading or something like that. Then if you're able to weave that in somehow into your introductory message, or if you are able to like get a meeting, a time to talk to them set up, and you're able to kind of like weave in that common interest of yours, then that's going to make it a lot easier to either get their attention or actually like build and nurture the relationship. There's a number of places to look for people to network. I would say my favorite is in-person networking events, especially in bigger cities. These are always happening. I literally just go on Google and I look up networking events. Depending on your industry, I would type in industry networking events in X city. If you are working in engineering in Houston, I would type in engineering or STEM networking events in Houston. You also have LinkedIn nowadays. I feel like increasingly now more people are on LinkedIn. That's a really great tool. Also, if you're still going through school or if you just recently graduated, I think we really underestimate how big of a network we have when we are in school, because there's a lot of people in our immediate circle whose jobs are literally to help you and support you as a student, and they also like are going to know other people at your institution to talk to who might have the right network. Even now that I've graduated 2 years ago, I was talking to my old mentor the other day, telling her how I wanted to do a TEDx talk one day, and she was like, oh, did you ever have any classes with this professor in our program? She actually did a TEDx talk, and like, maybe you can talk to her. Other thing that I feel like people don't really think of is Google as a search engine has increasingly evolved and improved, especially with how quickly AI has grown and been integrated into all those things. So you can literally type in, if you know what you're looking for, like the type of role in the city you want to live at, the place you want to work, like if you can get really, really specific and Google it, someone's name might pop up or a company might pop up. That was exactly how I found the firm that I work for now. I think I literally typed in top government relations firm in Atlanta, and I found the government relations firm that I had reached out to them. I cold emailed and cold called my now boss, and it took a while because they didn't have an opportunity when I first reached out, but he remembered me, and a few months later, he was like, "Hey, we have an opportunity now. Are you still interested in? Do you want to apply?" And I applied and they hired me. Now that you kind of have an idea of who to look for, how to look for them, how to like talk to them and do that initial reach out. Now it's time to do that actual relationship building part, like doing that initial introduction and getting the initial conversation set up. I always recommend if you can meet someone in person, meet them in person. I really just don't think that talking to someone over a screen is ever going to be the equivalent to giving someone a nice little handshake and a smile, maybe even buying them a coffee. That's something that I always try to recommend. If you can do that, meet them in person. Be very respectful of these people's time. For example, I have people that message me on LinkedIn sometimes that they want to have a conversation with me. And I respond to them very quickly. And then I see them like posting and like opening my messages and they don't get back to me. And then they'll wait like a few days to get back to me. And I'm like, if someone is doing you a favor, not to put myself on a pedestal and say like I'm so high and mighty, but like if you're reaching out to a complete stranger, typically this is because they're a few steps ahead of you or they have information that you want to be mindful of their time. Also, if you're not someone who can kind of have like a conversation on the fly. Like me personally, I like to like do a little bit of research as to who they are and what they've done. And I just like to listen and then let the questions come. But some people can't do that and they're not good at that. And so you want to have like questions pre-prepared or even send them to them in advance if you'd like. Of course, you always want to follow up with them and thank them for their time. Typically, the next day or maybe even a few hours after you meet them is what's generally recommended. So that's the actual building the relationship part of like kind of getting it more so should I say establishing it. But then there's actually the fostering the relationship part because just because you meet someone once and have a coffee with them once doesn't mean that they're going to want to help you when you reach out to them 5 years later out of the blue and you guys haven't spoken a word since your coffee chat, right? There's a couple different ways that you can like nurture and foster a relationship. You can ask them, is there anything you're working on right now? Is there a project you're doing? And like, how can I support you? And you never know how you might be able to help them with their pursuits. I feel like a lot of young professionals and recent grads have this idea that we don't have anything to offer people who we are seeking help from, but you never know what type of insight or knowledge you might have that they don't know about that they'll be able to apply. For example, like I think our generation is really proficient and comfortable with AI, and maybe they don't know about an AI tip or tool that is going to significantly help them with something that they've expressed that they are trying to do. Maybe you're on social media and you say, oh, hey, like I'm happy to reshare that with my network. I'm happy to post this to my LinkedIn or my Instagram or whatever. There's a number of ways that you may not realize you can add value to a professional connection and relationship. And that also makes it feel a little less one sided. You can also engage with their stuff. If this person is on social media, if you guys do end up connecting on LinkedIn, or sometimes people I feel like nowadays increasingly are on things like Instagram and TikTok, of course you can engage with their stuff and support their stuff. You can also send them a message every now and then. That you can always wish them a happy holidays, or you can just ask them how they're doing as well. Just, hey, hope everything is well. Saw you got a new role. Saw you launched a book. Saw you started this new project. And the last thing I'll say is that you can always share things that they might be interested in. Maybe it's a networking event or a professional development event or an article or a tool or something just that indicates that, hey, I am listening to what you told me about what you're interested in and what you want to do. And I want to try and help you accomplish those things if I can. So when I started reaching out to people years ago and cold emailing them, I didn't really know what I was doing, honestly. It came out of a place of necessity. It came out of me getting rejected for internships and research projects and applications to jobs. And, I needed money. I needed experience. I only had waitress and barista on my resume for most of my time throughout school until my first year of grad school, until I was 22 years old. So I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but I was networking. I was building my network and I was making introductions and connections with people who were able to help me with things such as connecting me to other people who worked in the industry I was interested in. They helped me learn about the types of jobs that I could get with my degree and what those jobs looked like, what those jobs paid like, what was my potential to move up in a field like that. What did the overall job prospects and job, I guess, trajectory look like? They gave me information that allowed me to know, am I actually pursuing something that I'm going to enjoy, that I want to spend years and years dedicating my time to and building skills and experience in? People have sent jobs to me and said, "Hey, have you seen this? This might be something you're interested in." These connections that I was building through networking were able to answer questions and be resources for me that I just wasn't able to get through my family because I was the first to be entering and navigating these spaces. So, really, networking looks like a lot of different things. It's not as intimidating as people make it out to be. I think it's important to kind of find the right style of networking that works for you, that you're most content, that you actually enjoy doing, and just stick with that. But it could be cold emails, messages on LinkedIn, it could be calling people, it could be attending in person networking events. Sometimes there's virtual networking events, but again, I really just feel like networking is something that is historically done in person and kind of designed to be an in-person experience. Even posting content online, I would say this podcast that you're listening to right now is a form of me networking. It's a form of me trying to increase my visibility and increase my reach. Again, there's commenting on people's LinkedIn's and social medias, or whatever type of social media they have, engaging with them and sending people events or information that you think that they would be interested in. Nearly every job I've ever had over the last several years, I've gone through either introducing myself and making a connection, or by getting introduced to someone that brought me to the right connection. They say your network is your net worth for a reason, not just in monetary terms, but in terms of community as well. I feel like, especially if you're someone who is ambitious and you're looking to build things from scratch and have these high aspiration goals for yourself, having community along the way is really important, because no matter how talented or how special you think you are, you can't do everything alone. So we're not meant to do everything alone. And also, we just don't have to. Thank you so much for listening. If you've resonated with this episode, then I ask that you please give it a like, a follow, a comment. This will really help other people be able to find the podcast more easily too. You can reach me on LinkedIn, but also my TikTok and Instagram is at Gianna Linares. It's just my first and last name. And stay tuned because I post new podcast episodes every Sunday.